on the 5th day of June 1944, just as you see them here, a fleet of more than 4,000 ships put out from England. This was D-Day, 4th anniversary of the Battle of Dunkirk, and the Allied armies were striking back. Was underway. Today, just as in these scenes, the armies of the United Nations have made their first landings on the soil of Western Europe. Another of the great decisive battles of world history has been joined. This is the day for which free people long have waited. This is D-Day.
And I was born in Cleveland, Ohio on September 3rd, 1918.
And that makes you 100 years and 2 months
Exactly.
of age.
Yes.
And
yes.
you're an amazing specimen for a centurion.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for being here with us. Tell us a little bit about your family, David. What was your father's name and occupation?
My father's name was David A. Fleming Sr., and he was in sales of industrial safes in the eastern half of the United States. We lived in Cleveland only my first 6 years, and then my father's work moved us to Cincinnati, Ohio, where we lived for 2 years, and then from there we moved to Greensburg, Pennsylvania.
Now, what was your mother's name?
My mother's name was Harriet Selkrig.
And was she a native of Ohio?
No, my mother was a native of the little town of Northeast Pennsylvania, and in Northeast Pennsylvania I had grandparents, 4 aunts, 4 uncles, and 26 cousins.
So there was a large family contingency there.
Indeed it was, yes. After that I had an opportunity to work for Wright Aeronautical in Paterson, New Jersey, which I did, and I was in public relations there, and I was only there a year before being drafted into the Army.
Tell us about that experience and then how you ended up in the Air Force.
Well, I wanted to be in the Air Force, and I specified that during the drafting process, and they were good enough to accommodate that desire on my part, and I'm so glad that I did end up in the Air Force, because my tour of duty overseas was more than a little interesting because I was in the Air Force.
And the Air Force at that time was a relatively new organization.
Yes, it was. My first assignment in England was in North England at a strategic air depot, and the mission there was to repair bomb damage of heavy bombers, B-24s, B-17s, as they came back from missions. And oftentimes they'd come back severely damaged by anti-aircraft fire, German anti-aircraft fire, and oftentimes they would have to belly land because they had no hydraulics that were shot out, and as they would land, when they were 500 or 600 feet off the ground, they would shoot off red flares from the cockpit of the B-24, signifying that there were dead and wounded on board. And it's a 10-man crew and heavy bombers, and so oftentimes there were 4 or 5 men who had been shot, either wounded or killed. And so we had emergency facilities to race down to the end of the runway until the B-24 stopped skidding on its belly. So those are exciting moments in time.
And where did you go for your early training, your boot camp?
My induction was actually at Jefferson Barracks, Missouri. I do recall it was in February, and there was 10 men in a tent and a potbelly stove for 0 temperatures at night, and we had a nickname for that camp. We called it Pneumonia Gulch. And so
probably very realistically named.
It was. There was a lot of sick recruits.
Was it difficult for you to become accustomed to sleeping in a tent with 9 other people?
Oh, I recall thinking many times that I'm a part of a worldwide event, and it has worldwide significance. And here I am, through no effort or fault of my own, being a part of it, and I was thankful. It was an honor for me to serve my country.
So no hesitation on your part at
Oh
all?
no, not at all. No, not.
Did your family support your decision to join?
Absolutely. Well, I didn't join. I was drafted.
You were drafted.
Yeah, but sure, they supported me absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And the patriotism was at a high level in our whole country.
So when you left Hattiesburg, where did you go?
I went to a camp on the Hudson River just north of New York City for debarkation to England.
Mm-hmm.
And that troop transport to England consisted of a 14-ship troop convoy. Mm-hmm. And these were converted cargo, or sometimes a combination of cargo and passenger ships. And the ship I was on had carried about 200 passengers and the rest cargo. And they had converted the hull of the ship to bunks, and the bunks were 5 bunk high, and I was assigned the 4th bunk from 12 midnight till 8 a.m. From 8 to 4 another soldier was assigned, and from 4 to 8 still another. So the same bunk accommodated 3 different soldiers, and so that was quite a unique experience.
I bet it was.
Also, the chow lines, there was only 2 servings a day, and it was about a 4-hour standing in line to get to where the chow was, wrapping around the ship's deck.
4 hours?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And the dinner entree was horse meat. I do remember that.
Ooh.
And prior to this convoy, and we couldn't go any faster than the slowest ship in the 14-ship convoy, so it took us 14 days to get to England, to Southampton, England. And prior troop convoys had been attacked by German submarines and torpedoed and sunk. So we had been assigned a Navy destroyer to accompany our convoy. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was pretty interesting too. But otherwise we ran into some heavy seas, and there was seasickness. And also there were 6,000 men on my ship that I was on.
What time of the year was it? Do you remember?
If I recall, it was June.
That would have been a pretty sporty ride about that time.
Yeah, it had been a swimming pool, had been converted to a latrine, and on the outer circumference of the latrine were toilets, and on the inner circumference were sinks.
Were you aware of what the future plans were going to be for that group, or were you just awaiting instructions?
I was just awaiting instructions. I didn't know in which direction I would go or how I would get there. And finally it was decided that I would be part of this 3rd Strategic Air Depot in Watton, England, which is a little bit north of the larger town of Norwich, about 120 miles north of London, servicing B-24s and B-17 bombers.
Tell us a little bit about those aircraft. Those were enormous airplanes.
They were, and they were, as I've said, they were 10-man crew, and there was a heavy bomb load and 8 50 caliber machine guns, 4 in each wing. Also waist gunners, 50 caliber machine gun waist gunners, and this midway on the fuselage of the airplane, there was a bubble on the top of the fuselage, which was a gun in position as well, a 50 caliber gun, and a nose gunner, and there was a tail gunner, and a bubble on the bottom of the fuselage, all with 50 caliber machine guns. And so it was a bristling, battle-ready aircraft in every respect. They would also be attacked from time to time by the Luftwaffe, which was German fighter planes. Finally, our own fighter planes went to meet with them and shoot them down. So, but all that battle damage coming back right off the missions made it kind of a chaotic situation sometimes at this base where I was.
What was your job on that base?
I was in charge of a certain amount of inventory of airplane parts and getting it delivered to the mechanics working on the aircraft when they needed it, and getting familiar with the specifications of the parts so that I could pull the right thing when they order them. And
do you have a most memorable day while you were there? Describe just the most vivid memory that you have.
I think it was when a B-24 had suffered a lot of battle damage and had 2 engines out of four engines, and they were trying to get back with 2 engines. Out of their 10-man crew, 3 had been killed, and there was 4 badly wounded. The hydraulic system on this B-24 had been shot out, so it couldn't lower its landing gear, and it was firing red rockets out of the cockpit of the aircraft to let the people on the ground know that there was dead and wounded on board, and they would need help as soon as they stopped skidding on their belly to the end of the runway. So that was a memorable event for me.
And that aircraft must have dropped like a rock if it was coming in like that.
It did. It was miraculous that the pilot and the co-pilot could control it enough to get it back from the mission, and certainly to get it landed. So, and that sort of thing happened fairly often where I was there. And sometimes I would wake up in the morning at this strategic air depot when it was before dawn, like 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock, 4:30, and I'd hear a dull roar, and I thought there must be a thunderstorm brewing. But it was not a thunderstorm. It was 1,000 heavy bomber airplanes headed for Germany.
So they were taking off.
They were
and
taking,
you were
because
just, oh my
these
goodness.
bomber bases were all around us, within a 100-mile radius of where we were, and they had all assembled together, coordinated their flight, and they were together, and there was 1,000 of them, and it was big news. And then we were getting close to D-Day. It had been planned for such a long time. General Dwight Eisenhower had been put in charge of the Supreme Commander. I was sent to Birmingham, England, southern England, and at that time Hitler wanted to destroy London. So he was sending over these buzz bombs, which flew at very low altitudes to fly under the radar. And so they would fly across the English Channel. As they approached our location where I was, we were all sleeping in foxholes. British Spitfire fighter aircraft were waiting for these buzz bombs above their altitude. And as they would clear the English Channel, they would dive on them and fire at them, and oftentimes disable them enough that they would start erratic flight, and oftentimes they would land in the field next to us, and the field would shake. It would shake like, literally like some unforeseen power was shaking the whole earth that you were living in part of. And so that was luckily that was a short term experience, and but I was there, I don't know, maybe for 4 months, 3 or 4 months. And then after that, D-Day occurred on June the 6th of 1944. This outfit that I was with in southern England was a P-47 fighter group. We were to be sent over there, but not until they could be made ready for us. So, and German resistance to the invasion was stiff, and for the first 2 or 3 weeks, we couldn't even get off of Omaha Beach, our infantry, because we were being pinned down by German machine gun fire and everything that they had to throw at us. We finally got the town of St. Lo in flames, and that's where General George S. Patton formed his Third Army, which is world famous, and the Army Corps of Engineers bulldozed an airstrip for our outfit near St. Lo, the town of St. Lo, and clad it with steel plating so that our P-47 fighter planes could land. And we were then called from Birmingham, England. We had been on standby there, waiting for this call, and we were called, and our aircraft landed on that strip, and we lived in pup tents from then on, and our rations were K rations, and if it was a good situation, we would get C rations, which mean maybe we got some beef stew or something good like that. The K rations were just crackers and cheese and
Spam.
and spam and things like that. Yes. So, and then finally our infantry broke out of St. Lo, and we were under the command of George S. Patton and his Third Army. Our P-47 outfit was, and once we broke out of our infantry broke out of St. Lo, General Patton and the Third Army and us almost raced across France. We had the German army on the run, and they were going fast, and we got so fast that our supply trains couldn't keep up with our mechanized units, our tanks and our mechanized military equipment, and we literally ran out of gas, and our advance had to be stopped.
And that was called?
And quickly, what was formed was a Red Ball Express, and that consisted of many 10-wheel Army trucks, which would load up with gas on Omaha Beach on the coast, and then haul it to the battle line in the field. And that operation went on 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, making sure that General Patton was supplied all the fuel he needed. And we finally freed Paris, and there was tearful Parisians and Frenchmen and much celebration, and I do remember that.
I cannot imagine how happy those people were to see you.
You can't imagine is the right word. You couldn't imagine. They had been under German occupation. Their life was not their own. Their life routine was not their own. And everything was done on the German timetable, not theirs.
They were starving. Food was hard to come by for everyone, for the Parisians and the French as well as the Germans.
Right.
So everyone was desperate.
Yes, yeah, it was a desperate situation. We were more than welcome by the French.
Spoke a little bit about Omaha Beach. Were you ever on Omaha Beach?
Yes, we were put down at Omaha Beach on the ship that we were on.
Describe that landing. That had to be something that was really extraordinary.
Well, the crossing, the English Channel is 80 miles long, and the crossing was in a mothership, and then these smaller troop ships were what we rode to the shore in, and they would go full tilt as far as concerned to get as close to the shore as they could before they hit bottom, and then the gate would drop down and we would barrel out of there and get under the protection of the cliffs that were overshadowing Omaha Beach, and so that we were out of range of any fire. And then when it was more under our control, they transported us to St. Lo, or that area, which is where our new airstrip had been built, and we started to get that organized to receive our P-47 aircraft.
Do you have any recollection of how many were killed landing at Omaha Beach?
9,500 American soldiers were killed.
And they're buried there.
Yes.
Just a short distance.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. That's what happened.
That had to have just been a bloodbath. I cannot imagine.
Even the waves lapping up on the shore were red with blood.
Mm-hmm.
It was a horrific situation, a chaotic situation, and it was something you'll never forget. And I've never tried to remember it until now. I've not had any experience reciting what I'm telling you now, so if I'm a clumsy speaker, you'll have to excuse me because I've had no practice. And then about the middle of December, we found ourselves in a little town called Mormont-le-Grand, and it was mid-December then, and the significant thing about that is that there's two significant things. One, the weather was terrible. It was snowing, low clouds, no visibility. Our aircraft could not fly. We were grounded for 2 weeks, and we were 9 kilometers from Bastogne, where our 101st Airborne Infantry Division had been surrounded by the German army, and they were beating them up. They were killing and taking American prisoners and taking our equipment. They were asked to surrender. They sent a white flag and a 4-man group to ask General McAuliffe, who was the commanding general of the 101st Airborne Division, to ask him to surrender, because if not, his division was going to be annihilated. General McAuliffe had some other officers around him, and he said, "What should I tell him?" The officer said, "Well, what do you feel?" And he said, "Nuts." And they told him that's what to tell him. So that became history. His reply to the German officer was nuts. And they didn't quite know how to interpret that. But they finally got the
nuts
idea.
Or he was nuts.
We weren't moving. The 101st Airborne was not moving out of Bastogne.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, after 2 terribly hard weeks of bad weather, we had some good weather, and our P-47s were able to take off. And we went over to Bastogne, and we bombed and strafed and fired our rockets into the German troops, the German tanks, and the German mechanized units, and we sent them scattering. And our 101st Airborne Division was freed up to rejoin the battle line. And so that was a great event. That was an important event.
Very historical event.
It was. And General Patton was a audacious, colorful commanding general. So I was proud to have served under his command. The pride was justified by all of his accomplishments, of course. Then from there we went on as we pushed the German army back into Germany. We went on to a town that had been abandoned named Hanford, Germany, which was near the North Sea. It was an airstrip, and so our outfit landed there, and we had luxury at the moment because we had abandoned housing around the airstrip, and we got to live in a house.
No longer in a pup tent or a foxhole.
No longer in a pup tent, nor a foxhole, and we had all kinds of good things to liberate from the house, German uniforms and things like that. Then finally the war was over, and we started counting points. There was a general in Washington at the War Department named General Hershey, and he devised these gold bars that could be worn on your uniform, and for each gold bar represented 6 months of overseas service. And so I had 5 of them by that time. And
so you had served in 30 months of overseas.
Yes. And we all called those gold bars for our uniform Hershey bars. And so we always kind of liked that we were collecting Hershey bars.
What were the troops' reaction to the horrific torture of the Holocaust and that sort of thing?
Well, it was. This is why we're here fighting this war.
So you knew it, and you believed it.
Absolutely, sure, yeah. This can't be allowed in the world we live in, and that's how we felt.
Outrage.
Unacceptable.
Yeah, outrage.
Yeah, it has to be changed. So that galvanized us all the more. In this 406 fighter group that I was a part of, there was kind of a blurry line between officers and enlisted men. We were all in this together, and we would do anything for each other, no matter what it was. So it gets a little emotional.
Well, it should. I mean, that was a very...
These men that I knew, the pilots, some of them didn't come back from missions. And we'd send a 14-plane mission out and I was part of operations. I would brief them on the missions, what the targets were, or I'd help do that. I didn't do it myself. And then, so we'd have 14 of our squadron take off for the mission. And then when they were coming back, we would all line the runway to count how many were coming back. We hoped 14, but all too often it was 12 or 11. And then, of course, the anxiety of who didn't come back, and why, and what the circumstances were, and all those things. But those are dramatic, chaotic things. It's an emotional thing. I'll make no bones about it. Because I knew these guys, and they were close to me. So I have trouble with that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what is your most vivid memory?
well, I think it was the circumstance where we knew that we were only 9 kilometers from Bastogne, and that our 101st Airborne Division was trapped. Mm-hmm. We couldn't fly because of the weather. And I remember going to a church on Christmas Eve, Christmas Eve, and the longest, saddest faces on soldiers you've ever seen in your life. I remember that very clearly, and I think that's my most vivid memory. And then when the weather broke and we could take off and go do what we do best over Bastogne, that's a great feeling. Mm-hmm. Wonderful feeling.
Those men were poised on the brink of amazing success or amazing defeat. Tell us about departing and coming back home.
Well, after a painful wait for that moment to happen, they took us all the way back to Southampton in England. Mm-hmm. And we were put on ships, not a 14-ship convoy, but troop ships. We didn't need the Navy destroyer escort, so we made pretty good time getting back. So we got back to New York. My mother, for some reason, I've forgotten now what the reason was, but she couldn't be there, so my dad was there to meet me.
So he was in New York to meet you.
He definitely was. It's just an emotional, again, more emotion. I'm not an emotional person, but some of these things get to me. Mm-hmm. And so I must apologize for that.
No apology needed. And you have numerous grandchildren.
16 grandchildren and 15 great-grandchildren.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for being with us today. And more importantly, thank you for your service to our country and a time where we needed every man and every woman and their dedication and their loyalty to the United States of America. Thank you for being here.
It was my honor to have served.
The face of freedom stands tall and proud, furrows wrinkle on her perfect brow, footprints on the moon, a star-spangled sight, as the eagle soared into dawn's new light. Let every nation know, whether friend or foe, this eagle will soar forever and evermore. Let every nation long to see on bended knee with the dawn of victory, the dawn of liberty. In the beginning, the message was clear. Let every nation hear, the sound of freedom is near. Now we say goodbye the centuries of strife and brush away the tears from freedom's eye. Let every nation know, whether friend or foe, this eagle will soar forever and evermore. Let every nation long to see on bended knee with the dawn of victory, the dawn of liberty. What will it be? The dawn of liberty? Will the torch burn free, or be a tear-stained memory? Let every nation sing. Let freedom ring like chains of gold. Our anchor will hold. Let every nation know, whether friend or foe, this eagle will soar forever and evermore. Let every nation long to see on bended knee with the dawn of victory, the dawn of liberty. The dawn of liberty. The dawn of liberty. Let freedom ring.